The following footage was all recorded on Legendary. What's up guys, Hokie Bird here, bringing you episode 5 of Hokie's School of Halo. In this episode we're going to be covering the other set of enemies that you'll encounter during the game, the Flood. About halfway through Halo Combat Evolved, the game turns from futuristic military sci-fi shooter to a survival horror zombie game with the introduction of the Flood. In Halo Combat Evolved, there are 3 different forms of Flood that you'll encounter throughout the course of the campaign: Infection forms, Combat forms, and Carrier forms. Once again, I'll be covering each of these classes in the order that you encounter them in the game, so first up we have the Infection forms. Infection forms are the first and most basic form of Flood that you'll encounter in the game. They're the single weakest enemies found in the game, but what they lack in strength they make up for in sheer numbers. Often encountered in large hordes, Infection forms will attack by jumping at you, but die upon impact with your energy shields, though not before doing a small amount of damage. If your energy shields are depleted, however, they will latch onto you and literally eat away at your health. In other words, if your shields are intact, you don't have to worry too much about Infection forms, but if they're depleted, Infection forms become a very serious threat. Infection forms are the single weakest enemies found in the game. They can be killed in one hit by absolutely anything, even your melee attack. When destroyed, Infection forms will die with a small pop, which can destroy other Infection forms around them, sometimes causing a nice chain reaction. In general, I deal with Infection forms by just melee attacking them. Occasionally, when this becomes too tedious or tiresome, I'll pick up another weapon and use that to shoot them, so that I don't waste ammo for the weapons that I'm carrying. In more desperate situations where Infection forms are bearing down on me and my shields are depleted, I'll just shoot them and not care about wasting ammo. Next up, we have the Combat forms. Combat forms are the results of Marines or elites that have been infected by the Flood and are the primary threats in all Flood-based encounters. They have a long whip arm on their left arm that they will use to melee attack you, and on their right arm is a normal hand which will often carry a weapon. Combat forms can carry any weapon in the game that you can carry except for the sniper rifle. The most dangerous ones that you'll encounter will have either shotguns, assault rifles, or rocket launchers. Like the Infection forms, Combat forms tend to attack in hordes. Instead of using smart tactics like elites, Combat forms will simply run at you while firing their weapons and will try to overwhelm you with their sheer numbers. If they get close enough, they'll use their whip arm to melee you, which does quite a significant amount of damage. They don't use grenades, but they often drop them when they're killed. This can mean a plentiful supply of grenades for you, but it can also lead to deadly chain reactions when you inevitably set off an explosion. Fighting Combat forms is drastically different than fighting Covenant. The best weapons to use against them are the shotgun, pistol, and grenades. I generally like to pick off as many from range as I can with the pistol before they close the gap. Once they get up close, I'll switch to the shotgun, which is the best close quarters weapon in the game. Another option is to use the rocket launcher, though it's slow to reload and doesn't hold very much ammo. Using a rocket launcher also means that you have to give up either your shotgun or your pistol, which is something you simply do not want to do. Using cover is absolutely essential when fighting Combat forms. There are often so many of them that they will cut you down in mere seconds with all their weapons firing at you at once. Instead, I'll usually get their attention and then hide around a corner while I let them come to me. Whenever I start to get overwhelmed, I'll toss a grenade, and that will usually buy me enough time to at least partially reload the shotgun. It's also possible to dismember Combat forms by shooting their arms. When you shoot their arms enough times, they'll come off, and if you can manage to do this to both arms of a single Combat form, you'll render it harmless. Unfortunately, you'll almost never have enough time to do this, though it certainly can be amusing if you can pull it off. Occasionally, if you inflict enough damage to Combat forms without killing them outright, they'll fall over without actually being dead. They'll then get back up after a few seconds, but when they do, they won't have the weapon that they were carrying before they fell down, and their only form of attack will be their whip arm. If you shoot off the whip arm while the Combat form is down, it will be rendered harmless. This is a good strategy for the very first few encounters that you have with Combat forms in the mission 343 Guilty Spark before you find your first shotgun. You only really need to worry about this though if you're using a weapon other than the shotgun, rocket launcher, or grenades, since those weapons will always kill them outright before they even have time to pretend to be dead. One final thing to note about combat forms is that the sniper rifle is completely useless against them. It has absolutely no effect when you shoot them and should never be used against them. The needler is also not a good choice to use against them since it will only harm them if it super detonates. Melee in combat forms also has no effect, so don't even bother. Plasma weapons are semi-effective at best and should only be used when you have no other options, which you almost always will. In general, when I'm fighting combat forms, I'll use the pistol to pick off as many as I can from range before switching to the shotgun to take them out at close quarters. Last up, we have the carrier forms, which are first seen at the beginning of the library mission. Carrier forms are the insidious method for which the Flood reproduces. They contain infection forms inside of them, which are apparently under quite a lot of pressure. They'll explode violently when you shoot them, releasing the 6 or so infection forms that they were carrying. If you don't shoot them, carrier forms will attempt to get close to you before falling over and exploding on their own, causing significant damage and often setting off nearby grenades. Carrier forms are fairly weak and can be killed by just about any weapon. I highly recommend having a pistol and or shotgun for dealing with combat forms, so these are the weapons that you should use against carrier forms. If you kill a carrier form with an explosion, such as a grenade or rocket, it will go flying, but it won't explode until it comes to a rest. Because carrier forms explode when shot, it can be a very useful strategy to use them as makeshift grenades. If there are any combat forms near them when they explode, they will be killed and blown away by the force of the explosion. On the other hand, carrier forms will send weapons flying when they explode, just like grenades would, since weapons in Halo Combat Evolved are about as heavy as cardboard boxes. In other words, if there's a shotgun on the ground, wait until the carrier form is far enough away from it before shooting it, so that you can then pick up the ammo. In general, I deal with carrier forms with either the shotgun or the pistol. They really aren't that much of a threat unless they get close to you and or set off grenades on the ground. Alright guys, that is just about going to wrap up episode 5. As always, I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you learned something, and I hope you'll join me next time for the 6th and final episode of Hokie's School of Halo, where I'm going to be going over all the vehicles that you'll encounter during the campaign. So until then, I'm Hokie Bird, and I'm out. See you later, guys.